Thank you, Harold Payne. Isn't it great to have a theme song for our... If we just put the 9 and 11, we could put it out there on TV. People ask, and if you've been coming to church for a while, we're so blessed to have Harold every once in a while. And every time what Harold does is he seems to listen from this deep place. He's the only musician I know that usually has his eyes closed during the service and he's actually still listening and not asleep. And what he does is he takes a lot of the information and he gets up and he just does a song on the spot to it. And what people always ask me after, and I'm sure they ask Harold, is how do you do it? And so our whole service today, our message today, is about how Harold does it. How Harold prepares for come to the workshop. Do you have one of those great friends? I have one. His name is Serge. Hopefully you have a couple of them. And within a few minutes of talking with Serge, I, no matter what is going on in my life, feel like myself again. Do you have one of those friends where you can laugh or cry or complain or talk smack or whatever it is? It doesn't matter because you're not going to be judged. You're absolutely going to be accepted in that moment. And I love that it feels like the filter has gone and the mask has come off, and immediately I feel like myself again, my true self again. And it's a connection to spontaneity. It's a connection to creativity. It's a connection with my own spirit. And I have those experiences and I think to myself, I never want the filter or the mask again. I want to be like this all the time. And usually it doesn't take too long before I have to put it on again. And it's not that the masks or the filters that we use aren't important sometimes. But what can happen is we can sometimes focus so much on trying to be something or somebody else that we can lose that most creative power that we have, which is simply that awareness of who we really are, to utilize it in a powerful way. One of my favorite ministers was Dr. Fred Vogt, who was the minister of the Mile High Church in Colorado, which today is the largest church in our movement. And when I first witnessed him, I was just a teenager, and he was getting on in years. And I never met him because I was scared of him. Because the man had no filter. And we'd be in a meeting or something, and I'd see him just get up if the meeting was boring him, and he'd just walk out of the room. And he'd always say what he was thinking, even if it could be offensive to someone around him. One time there was an opening prayer, a blessing of a service going on, and there was a circle of folks praying, and they were all holding hands, and the practitioner was kind of going on and on a little bit, and Fred shouted, "And so it is," right in the middle. Opened up his hands and walked away, and that was the prayer, which was complete. And so, observing Dr. Fred, I said, I want to be more like him. And initially I kind of chalked it up to the idea that Fred was old. And you can do that kind of thing when you're older. This is 14-year-old Josh thinking here. But looking back now, I can see that there was something deeper going on in Fred. That Fred was committed to spontaneity. That he was committed to not allowing correctness or filters to get in the way of what was most important to him, and that was the truth. And that were the values that he held most sacred in his life. Sometimes when it comes to our values and virtues, we're the greatest defenders of them in our own experience of life, and we're the greatest practitioners of them in our lives too. It's really up to us to focus in on and feel what those creative energies are within our spirit and bring them into our lives. Because it is my belief that when we do that, there is no greater power in the universe than experiencing and knowing that God within us. Ernest Holmes said, when we are tuned to our inner creativeness, we are consciously communicating with God. There's an author, she's a social scientist, her name is Ellen Langer, and I think that she speaks to the importance of depending on our own creative energies as opposed to the thoughts and the way things are done around us, as opposed to the status quo. She invites us to imagine a situation in which an elderly woman is able to live independently. She typically shops for her groceries every few days, When she arrives at her apartment door, she puts down the grocery bag, searches for the key, opens the door, and then bends down to pick up the bag and carries it inside. Today, however, is different. She puts the bag down but can't bend over far enough to pick it up. Luckily, a neighbor happens by to help her, but the problem persists. If she can't get her groceries home, she is no longer able to take care of herself. Her adult children, fearing for her diminished state, help her move to a nursing home. Now, consider this scenario. An elderly woman living independently comes back to her apartment with her groceries. She places the bag on a small shelf outside her door, searches for her key, opens the door, and carries in her grocery bag. In the first case, the woman is considered too frail to care for herself, but not in the latter. The only difference is a small piece of wood serving as a shelf. So I love that example. That in some instances, all it is a little piece of wood. All it is a little creativity. All it is a little open-mindedness. And for me, where the preparing for spontaneity comes in this circumstance and can assist all of us in our lives, is it's so easy to see something happening around us and to give in with the everyday thinking about it that's out there in the world. To give up our own spontaneous creative self, which often contains the intuition and wisdom that we're looking for, to say, well, most people see this circumstance as that way, or so-and-so thinks this is the truth. So we give up our own truth. We give up our own ability to have insight and to find a creative solution at times to a problem that is in front of us. There's a German philosopher by the name of Helmholtz. I'd like that to be a nickname, Helmholtz. And he shared a three-step process for having a new thought. The first step was preparation. And I like this step because this is about looking at a problem or a blank canvas and gathering all the information we need about it. So being like a good journalist, doing all the reporting we need for whatever is facing us. Then the next step is incubation. Incubation is my favorite step because it means let it go. Go see a movie. Go take a walk. Go take a nap. Stop thinking about the problem. And the third step was illumination. That's when the answer or the solution just comes. Albert Einstein used to say that he got his best ideas while shaving. I heard it said that someone else once said that I get my best ideas while mowing the lawn. And the idea is to know these steps, that the groundwork is in the beginning, in the preparation. The rest is about learning to trust the process within ourselves and learning to trust ourselves. And spiritually, I think that for many of us, that's the thing that we're missing. Trusting ourselves. If only I could trust myself, I could use this creative mind more effectively. If only I could trust myself, I would have the courage to stand in my vulnerability, to speak my mind. If only I could trust myself, I could believe that indeed I believe in a spirit, a divine power that can perform miracles in my life, that can do good within me, and that could use me as a channel to serve those around me. When we're able to establish that trust, we again connect with a spontaneity of such power that it can unleash such creative strength in our lives. Langer continues, she says, the external world is socially constructed, but we rarely see it that way. Most things were initially designed to meet the needs of the designer and that person's conception of the typical person. If our socially constructed environment ceases to work for us, we see it as a fault of ours. It rarely occurs to us to attribute the problem to the environment or to change the construction to meet our needs. It goes back to what Viktor Frankl said, when we cannot change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But we misunderstand sometimes what that little change of thinking, that change of perspective can add to our lives, that it is not anything else but our own minds, our own lives that are a channel, our greatest channel for transformation in our lives. Be it facing a challenge or writing a song. And I'm going to invite Harold to come back up here because I've got a couple of questions to ask him. It's always great to share the stage with someone who I know as an award-winning songwriter has made a career out of trusting his own ability of preparing for spontaneity. So All that being said, Harold, can I simply ask you the question, how do you do it?
There we go. Well, for me, as you mentioned, it is all about trust. And trust comes from experience, and it's kind of like the book, The Outliers,
10,000 hour rule.
Yes, that, you know, I put my 10,000 plus hours in on performing and walking a little bit further out on the plank. I call it a plank to bridge. You have this fear, and you're walking out a little bit further, a half a step more, until it eventually becomes a bridge to the other side. And that's how I view trust. The experience begets confidence, begets trust, which is in a way a form of surrender, like letting go and trusting that, trusting in the spontaneity in yourself, in the divine, that something is going to happen. And we all do it every day in one form or another, and one of the ways we do it is when we speak. I mean, you started talking when you were a year and a half or something, babbling before that, and all these years we've been doing that. Right now I'm saying something in a way, in an intonation, with a vocabulary and a syntax that I've never used before, but yet I can talk as fast as I want. I know that something's going to come out and I trust it. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. So sometimes I say that to someone when they say, well, how do you do that? And I say, well, you are spontaneous every day with something that you trust over having done it so many times. And so for me, the beautiful thing about spontaneity is there isn't a filter. It's a forced unfilteredness, if you will, because there's a deadline, a very quick deadline, which is right now. When I write a song spontaneously, it's all those years of writing songs. It's just another song, but with a very quick deadline. There was a famous songwriter by the name of Sammy Kahn, who when asked, what comes first, the words or the music? And his reply was, the phone call. And so the phone call actually acted as a deadline, which really hyper-focuses you in the moment, because there's no chance to like overthink it. You just, whatever you come, and the exercise of doing that is really fulfilling, and you get to trust your intuition. And it also is affected by your audience, whether that be an audience of one, because when people know that you're living in the moment, they know that you've listened to everything that's going on right then and there, and it feels like you're connecting. So when I do a song on the spot, people feel like, okay, I'm tuning into them because I am. I'm not reciting something from before. It's the ultimate communication in a way. So.
Perfect.
When you say, and so it is, then I'm going to stop.
I'll try not to say it in the middle of the sentence, but I love that aspect, but that it almost seems like a bit of a contradiction, but it isn't, in the sense that spontaneity, the best kind, often requires a bit of preparation, doesn't it?
Well, yes. In a way, it's because you become, when I looked at when I wrote this song last night or this morning, I went to the website and looked at it, and knowing a little bit about what's going on, when you get fluent in something, it's a lot easier to be spontaneous in it, because you're kind of swimming in the water, and it's helpful. And I do a lot of preparation in addition to an entire life of making up songs. Yes.
And it sounds like, for a lot of us, when it comes to spontaneity or bringing creativity in our lives, we have to know what our relationship is with this word new. It's kind of this idea that for some of us, new sounds dangerous, or new sounds unknown and scary. And so for a lot of us, the preparation is about learning to be comfortable and safe with something new. And my experience of you, Harold, is that there's deep listening going on. There's deep practice in your musical skill going on. There's deep humility and being present to divine forces going on, and that when you put yourself in a space, you've prepared yourself for that, something new to come place, to move into that trust of everything, including us around you, to provide you with the right information, right?
Well, it helps to have I'd call it a spiritual mosh pit that I can toss myself onto and knowing they're going to catch me.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, I like the pause there. And I was sharing with the congregation about your workshop last week, and again, Harold's doing a 1:30 p.m. workshop today on songwriting, that it's not about learning to be a great songwriter, and the idea to come isn't to, because you're a songwriter and want to learn something new, you can apply the principles and ideas that you're talking about to solving a big problem, to starting a business, to whatever it is that your own inner artist would want to do in your life. Do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, in a way, it's about using the principles of art, if you will, to affect your daily life.
And do you do this? Do you apply some of the same principles to your daily life?
I do, sometimes to good effect.
Yeah, I was thinking when we were talking in the last service too, David Lynch is a famous film director. He wrote a book about ideas, and he used the example of it being like catching a big fish. And that for a lot of us, our consciousness just goes a little bit below the surface to get an idea. And so we're always catching little fish, and they're usually the fish that people have caught before, and they've thrown them back in the water. And they're just the everyday fish, or things that we've seen before. But through our meditation practice, or through deep listening, or through reverence, what happens is we go deeper and deeper into the water, deeper and deeper into our subjective, where the real big fish are. And when we know how to catch those and bring those into our lives, we can really make amazing things happen. And so I guess to put that in a form of a question, perhaps is there an example of a big idea that you've brought forth, and would you say it's through the practice of listening and things like that have gotten you there?
Well, yeah, I think to take your analogy about the fish, I would say that in a weird way, when I do wordplay, which I do often, it's a way of preparing for spontaneity, and there's a certain catch and release factor there. If it's too corny, it's too bad I actually let it go. And so it's kind of a catch and release. If it's too small, I try not to subject my personal audience with it if possible.
So there's a commitment to excellence in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. But still keeping the flow going enough so that occasionally a minnow swims through.
I understand. So I'm going to ask Harold in the moment. Harold is willing, thankfully, to do this process to show us what he does through spontaneity and working with us. Before we do that, I just want to close with a thought here from William James, who tells us to seek out that particular mental attribute which makes you feel most deeply and vitally alive. So again, seek out that particular mental attribute which makes you feel most deeply and vitally alive. Hint, you're not going to find it at the mall or anywhere else. We're going to have to find it within ourselves, right? Along with which comes the inner voice, this mental attribute, which says, this is the real me. And when you have found that attitude, follow it. It's so important to recognize that element of newness, of life, of rejuvenation that we can often find ourselves looking for, especially when we're feeling in the midst of mediocrity or feeling stuck, is something always within ourselves. And then when we begin to practice it, it begins like two sticks coming together to start a fire. And we begin to live in harmony and alignment with who we really are again, which to me, in my mind, is the most powerful thing in the universe. Nothing compares to just how the power that can be achieved when you truly live in alignment and with confidence with who you are. So, Harold, I want to see you in action. Let's see.
Okay, I'm surrendering here for the moment. So in order to make this completely random, and there's certain advantage to randomness because it allows kind of a writing prompt or an outside source to give you the inspiration So you never have to have writing block, because you just take whatever comes at you and you make something out of it, and you keep the good stuff and throw the rest in some holding tank. So just for the fun of it here, I'm going to take a title from the audience or two. Let's say if there's more than one, I'll let you decide which one you'd like it to be, so no one thinks there's no shills in the audience out there. It's totally random. So does anyone have a title? Yes?
Let it be.
Let It Be. Well, I'd like a title of a song that has not already been used before. I mean, I could do a different song to that same title, but
The dove in the window.
the bird in the window. Okay. All right. Just so no one thinks that she's a plant out there in the audience. If someone else has a title, the bird in the window. Yes.
Let's contribute to each other.
Let's contribute to each other. Okay. And one more, if anybody wants to. Yes.
Big fish.
Big fish. Okay, so it's up to you to give the title.
Let's go with that segment. Let's contribute to each other.
All right. And last time I gave a choice of rock, reggae, blues, country, bossa nova, and it ended up being rock, pop, blues, or something like that. So we've got reggae, country, or bossa nova.
Reggae.
Okay, reggae. Okay, my spiritual mosh pit. Thank you. What's the title again? Let's contribute to each other, helping any way we can. Oh, let's contribute to our sisters and brothers, woman to woman and man to man. Oh, there's no time to think about it. Just tune in, and somehow you look at the dove in the window and the creativity begins. Oh, you know that sometimes there's a big fish. You gotta hook it in, put it on the dish and say, what scale shall I use? See, I get distracted sometimes. I hope by watching this process you'll be amused. Now I can't even remember the title. It was a part of letting you know my process is totally unbridled. So what is it? Let's contribute to each other. Don't let those incredible ideas get smothered. Let's contribute to each other with love and ideas and spontaneity. Just let it be. Oh, just let it be. Right here, right now, with the creativity. I'm feeling something from each one of you, but I can't give you credit for the song because I spent too much time on the accounting too. And I want you to know that you've inspired me, and if I go too long, you can fire me. Yeah. It's not about me up here trying to be a whiz.